I want to tell you about a woman that I worked with, and she was 39 years old. She had a good job, growing business on the side, a relationship that looked great on Instagram. And she sat in front of me and said something that I will never forget. She said, I don't know what's wrong with me. My life is good. I know it's good. So why do I feel like I'm disappearing? And I looked at her and I said, can I ask you something? When was the last time you said no to anything? And frankly, she couldn't answer. And honestly, I couldn't have answered that question either, not at her age. I didn't learn I could say no until I was 40. 40. I spent my entire 20s and 30s believing that the only way to get ahead in life, in business, in everything was to say yes to everything and just figure it out. I was on 5 different boards. I was helping raise over $100,000 a year for a nonprofit. At one point, I was an interim director of a nonprofit while practicing law full time and having a baby at home and a husband that traveled. And I just kept thinking one day this will all get easier. But I had no plan for how that was going to happen. How was it going to get easier if I just kept saying yes to everything because that was the only way to get ahead? I was just surviving my own schedule and calling it success. If somebody had sat me down at 25 or 30 and said, hey, the yes thing, it's not an asset, it's a trap. That would have actually been revolutionary for me. And I am not exaggerating. It would have changed the trajectory of my entire life. That at any point in time, I could change my mind and say no. So that's what this episode is, the conversation I wish someone had had with me many, many years ago. I call it the yes trap. And if you're someone who feels like you're doing everything right, but something still feels off, if you're exhausted in a way that a vacation doesn't fix, this is the episode for you. Okay, so let me tell you more about this woman. I'm going to call her Megan. Megan was making around $14,000 a month in her business, which, by the way, is great. So on paper, she was winning, but she was also working 55 hours or so a week, 55 to 60, and she hadn't taken a real weekend off in more than 4 months. She was the person in her friend group who always showed up, always brought the gift, always sent the text, always organized the dinner. And at work, she was the one who said yes to every meeting, every collaboration, every quick favor that never ended up to be the quick favor. And at home, she was really doing all of the invisible work there too, keeping track of the grocery list and the vet appointments, the birthday card for her partner's mom, the kind of stuff that doesn't show up on a to-do list, but it fills your brain like static. And you know what I'm talking about. She wasn't drowning in one area. She was slowly just sinking in all of them. And the worst part was nobody around her could actually see it because she was so good at saying yes that everyone assumed she was absolutely fine. So I asked her to do something simple. I said, okay, for 1 week, I want you to write down how you spend every single hour, not just work hours, all of your hours, from the moment that you wake up to the moment that you go to sleep. And next to each block, I want you to write one word. Is this something I chose or something I defaulted to? So that's it. Chose, defaulted. That was the whole assignment. Which one was it? She came back to me a week later, and before she even opened the notebook, she said, I'm embarrassed. And I asked her why. And she said, because almost nothing in here was a choice. Almost all of it was default. Things I said yes to because I didn't know how to say no. Things I kept doing because I'd always done them. Meetings I took because I felt like it was just rude not to. Conversations I stayed in because I didn't want to seem cold. And Out of 55 hours of work, only 11 were actually doing the thing that she built her business to do. The other 44 were things like coffee chats, free advice, website redesigns that nobody asked for, Instagram content that took 3 hours and got 47 likes. But it wasn't just work. Her weekends were actually also full of obligations that she hadn't chosen either. Brunches that she didn't want to go to, errands that she could have delegated, frankly, and favors that she didn't owe anyone. And here's the line that stopped me. She looked up and said, I just realized I've built an entire life around other people's needs, and I don't even know what mine are anymore. She wasn't failing. She wasn't lazy. She wasn't broken. She was just incredibly busy living a life she never actually chose. Now, here's the thing. I can already hear you saying, yes, but Sallie, there are things that we just have to do. There are things that, you just default to and they're required and you just got to get through it. Absolutely. I completely agree. And so again, I'm not asking you to swing the pendulum from 10 to 0. All I'm saying is that there are probably some things that she defaulted to that could be taken off of her list. And yes, there are going to be some things that you don't choose and you just have to do anyway. But we're going to look for at least the opportunity to swing the pendulum from 10 all the way back to 4, 5, and 6, somewhere in the middle, some kind of middle ground so that there is choice and a lot less default, so that she can build a life that reflects what she would actually choose. But here's the thing. What I know to be true is Megan isn't unusual. She's not an outlier or some kind of extreme case. When I started looking into this, I really realized what she was describing isn't a personal problem. It's a pattern. And researchers have been studying it, frankly, for years. This gap between how busy we are and how little of that busyness is actually chosen. And the data on it honestly stopped me in my tracks. See, Asana, the productivity platform that many of you probably use, they surveyed over 10,000 workers and found that 58% of the average week is spent on what they called work about work. Not creating, not building, not doing the thing that you're actually here to do, just managing, organizing, and communicating around it. Of the remaining time, only 33% goes to actual skilled work, and just 9% goes to this idea of big picture thinking. The where is my life actually going stuff that will help you ensure that you're on your path and not somebody else's. 9%? What? We're spending 58% of our week on things that are just merely about work, and only 9% of our time goes to thinking about like what we're actually creating. So if you've been wondering why you're exhausted, but you can't point to what you actually did today, there you go. There it is. 58% was just about work, 33% was on some sort of skilled work, and then just 9% on actually what's the life that I'm really building here, and is this the one that's actually meant for me? So we're going to take a little bit more than the 9% today and dive a little deeper into this concept. I think we deserve the extra time, don't you? Okay, so let me put it another way. Imagine that you're a chef and you love food. You went to the culinary school, you trained under someone amazing, you opened your own little, tiny restaurant because cooking is the thing that lights you up. It is why you are here and you know it. But instead of cooking, you spend your whole day writing emails about the menu, sitting in meetings about specials, searching for where someone put the recipe, and updating a spreadsheet about who ordered what. You're exhausted at the end of the day and you never stopped moving, but you actually barely cooked. Now, zoom out from the restaurant. That's not what's just happening at work. That's also what's happening in your life. You're spending so much time managing the logistics of being alive that you're never actually getting to live. Like the meal planning, the text responses, the social obligations, the mental load of like keeping everyone's world and, plates spinning. It fills the day before you ever get to the thing that makes you feel like you. So shocking, right? It happens to everyone. Here's another one that hit me. Research shows that it takes 23 minutes to fully refocus after a single interruption. 23 minutes. Now, that's up from 15 that it took us previously. So every single time you stop to check a text, respond to an email, answer a DM, you're not losing 30 seconds that you think you are by just randomly checking the screen. You're losing almost half an hour of focused attention. That's how long it takes you to get back into focus and deep into the exact work that you were previously doing. So if you get interrupted 6 or 7 times a day, which I am certain that I do, I don't know about you, and let's be honest, most of us get interrupted more than that. You're losing 3 to 4 hours of your life every single day to context switching from one task to another, not to doing things, to recovering from doing things. And here's the part that honestly made me just want to flip a table. I was just, so frustrated. Women still do 58% of the domestic work in their homes daily. 35% of women entrepreneurs are also working a full-time job. And only 17% of women business owners say their business gives them the time flexibility that they expected when they started. That means that 83% of female founders say that they don't have the time or flexibility that they thought they would when they started their business. And maybe you feel the exact same way as a mom, even too. I know I've felt that way, that you were told that it would be one particular way, but then, majority of your life is no longer your own. It is in fact spent on or for or taking care of the kids, right? And so you have lost all of that time. So a 2025 study found that 65% of female founders report burnout compared to only 37% of men. Not because women are weaker, not because we can't handle it, but because the world asks more of us and nobody tells us that we're allowed to say, no more. Enough is enough. So when we think about all of these statistics and all of this information together, you can feel for Megan, and hopefully you can have a little bit of grace for yourself too. And you can realize that we're not broken. The system just wasn't built for us. And instead of questioning the system like we should, we end up questioning ourselves. We think, I should be able to handle this. Everyone else seems to, and they certainly are putting it on social media as if they could or they can. So what's wrong with me? But the answer is nothing. Nothing is wrong with you. I promise. The math just doesn't math. And no amount of morning routines or productivity hacks will fix math that was never in your favor to start with. So there is nothing wrong with you. We're just being put into a system, again, that wasn't built with us. Okay, so here's where I want to go deeper, because I could tell you to say no more often and you would nod and yet nothing would change. And the reason nothing would change is because the yes trap isn't really about your schedule. It's so much more about your identity. See, somewhere around age 12, maybe 14, most of us got a memo. Nobody handed it to us. Nobody sat us down and said, listen to this, but we absorbed it somewhere along the way. And the memo said, your value comes from being useful, from being easy, from being the girl who shows up, who doesn't complain, who handles it, who makes everybody else feel fantastic and comfortable. And that memo somewhere became a blueprint. We built our entire lives around that memo. So by the time you're 30, you're not just saying yes to a meeting. You're fulfilling a role you didn't even know that you auditioned for. The dependable one. That's your role. Or maybe it's the low maintenance one, or the one who never needs anything and it feels impossible to say no. Not because you don't have the words, but because saying no feels like you're saying, I'm not a good person. And I'll tell you how deep this goes for me. I didn't just say yes at work. I said yes to everything. 5 boards, fundraising six figures for other people's organizations, running a nonprofit that I didn't even work for as a volunteer, while building a law practice and raising a baby. And the whole time I thought I was being impressive, right? I thought that this is what strong women do. I didn't realize I was building a life that looked incredible from the outside and was crushing me from the inside. I just kind of kept waiting for everything to get easier. Like some magical day was going to arrive where I'd finally be all caught up on everything on my to-do list. And now even saying it out loud, it sounds hysterical because that day never came, right? What came instead was a wall of frustration and burnout and me questioning myself and a whole lot of tears of trying to figure out, how did I get here? What happened? And I learned something a couple of years ago that completely reframed all of this for me. In trauma psychology, there's a concept called the Fawn response. You've probably heard of fight, flight, and freeze. Those are three big stress responses, but there is a fourth one. And fawning is when your nervous system decides that the safest thing to do in a threatening situation is actually to be agreeable, to appease, to make the other person happy so that they don't hurt you. Think of it like a dog rolling over and it shows its belly, and that's not affection, that's actually surrender. That's the dog saying, I'm not a threat, please don't hurt me. And here's the thing. Most people pleasers learned this response when they were children. They learned it because it worked, right? Maybe saying yes kept the peace at your house. Maybe being agreeable made a parent less angry or a teacher more approving. Maybe being useful was the only way that you could feel safe. And that strategy really got wired in and deep, and it became automatic. So when I say you're stuck in the yes trap, I'm not saying you have bad habits. I'm saying you're running a 30-year-old life with a survival strategy that was designed for a child. And that's not a character flaw. It's a coping mechanism. And it kept you safe once. And now, though, it's keeping you small. And I lived this, I can assure you. I was a people pleaser for years, decades, honestly. And it didn't just make me tired. It definitely kept me small. And that's the part that nobody warned me about. I wasn't thinking that I was giving too much, but the fact of the matter was I did. And I had nothing left for the one project that actually mattered. And that was me. How was I going to figure out the business that I wanted to start when all of my energy was going to other people's priorities and organizations? How was I going to ever discover the entrepreneur I wanted to become when I kept saying yes to other people and what they wanted from me? I mean, how was I ever going to hear my own inner voice when I was so busy answering everyone else's? And the fact is, I couldn't. That's the answer. I couldn't. And I didn't. Not for a very, very, very long time. Not until I was 40 years old or a little more. And frankly, so burnt out that saying no wasn't a choice anymore. It was the only thing that I had left. It was the only thing that I could do. And that's what I want to save you from. Not the burnout, although yes, that too, but the years and years and years of time, the years of not knowing who you are because you never had the space to find out. You know, a burnout researcher named Jane Morris found that women tend to carry 5 invisible scripts with them all the time. She calls them internal drivers. They are please others, be perfect, be strong, try hard, and hurry up. When I first heard these 5 things, I actually laughed. Let me say them to you again. Please others, be perfect, be strong, try hard, and hurry up. Because I was laughing because that's not a list of drivers. That is my frank personality. That's literally how I've described myself to others before. Oh yeah, I'm a perfectionist. I work really hard. I'm really independent. Like it's cute. Like it's a fun fact, but it's not a fun fact. That is a cage that kept me trapped for a really long time. Because when those 5 scripts are all running at once, there is no room for no. Saying no violates all 5 of them. So you say yes. I said yes. again and again and again. Not because you want to or because I want to, but because my nervous system doesn't know any other way. That is what is creating this vicious cycle. You say yes when you mean no, then you feel resentment, then you feel guilty for feeling resentment because she was just asking for help or it's not that big of a deal. So you overcompensate by saying yes to the next thing, even harder, and this cycle just tightens. And eventually, you're not even mad at the people asking, you're just mad at yourself for not having boundaries, for not knowing how to stop this cycle, and frankly, for building a life that looks incredible from the outside and feels like a prison from the inside. And if you are sitting here right now recognizing yourself in this, I want you to please, please, please hear me and say, that is not a personal failure. That is nothing more than a pattern. And frankly, I know from personal experience that these patterns can be broken. So I want to talk now about what's actually happening inside your brain when you live like this too, because I was so tired. I was so exhausted all the time. And it's not just that you're tired. Something real neurologically is actually happening. And once I learned this, it made me feel so much better. And there's a concept in psychology called decision fatigue. A researcher named Roy Baumeister studied it, and he found that your brain really has a limited amount of decision-making energy every single day. It is very limited. It is not unlimited like we believe. It is finite, like a phone battery. You're going to wake up with 100% of decision-making capacity, and then it is going to wane throughout the day and keep going. But every choice you make, what to wear, what to eat, whether to reply to that text, what to say in that email, whether you take that meeting, it drains that battery a little bit each and every time. And here's what matters. Your brain doesn't know the difference between a small decision and a big one. So choosing a filter for an Instagram story uses the same cognitive fuel as deciding whether to end a relationship that isn't working. Isn't that crazy? So by the end of the day, after 100 tiny yeses, you're at about 8% battery life yet. And the decisions that actually matter, the ones about your life, your direction, your future, right? You don't have anything left to make them, to contemplate at the end of the day, right? Where you want to go, and are you living as real and authentically and aligned as you possibly can, right? So you punt. You say, oh gosh, no more of that. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I want to numb out. I'll just think about that tomorrow. And you stay stuck in the relationship for another month. You keep the same pricing. You don't have the hard conversation with that client that you should have maybe fired, or you don't have the difficult conversation with your kid or your friend, not because you're weak, but just frankly, you're depleted. You're making 1,000 decisions a day for everyone else, and there's nothing left for you. And this is real, right? And it's not your fault. Frankly, there's an economics concept called opportunity cost, and it's the price tag nobody shows you, right? Every time you say yes to one thing, you automatically say no to something else, but the no is silent. There's no notification, no invoice for the no. Nobody sends you a bill for the book you didn't read because you were answering emails. Nobody charges you for the workout you skipped because you were doing something else, a favor for someone else, unless you have a private trainer, but you know what I mean. Nobody shows you a receipt for the conversation with your partner that you didn't have because you were too wiped out to be present. But there is a cost, and it is real. And that cost compounds over time. Believe me, I've experienced it. So when you look up at 30 or 40 and think, how did I get here? It's not because you made one big wrong turn. It's because 1,000 tiny yeses added up to a life that you never actually chose. But here's what I think is the most expensive thing the yes trap takes from you. And it's not your time, and it's not your energy. It's not even your money. Frankly, it's your relationship with yourself. Every time you say yes, when your body was screaming no, you break a very small promise to yourself. and you teach yourself what I want. What I truly want doesn't matter. What I need isn't important enough. And my gut, my intuition doesn't count. You do that enough times and something terrifying happens. You stop hearing yourself and your gut goes quiet, not because it doesn't have anything to say, but because it learned that, frankly, you're not listening anyway. And then you're stuck, not because you don't know what you want, but because you've lost the ability now to even hear it. That voice has become so quiet, you feel like it's not even there anymore. And I think that that's what Megan was saying. That's what she meant when she said, I feel like I'm disappearing. She wasn't being dramatic. She was being actually pretty precise. The part of her that makes choices, the part that says, this is what I want, this is who I am, this is what I'm gonna do, had gotten so quiet, she just couldn't find it anymore. And that's a scary feeling. This nuance is so completely important. And it's the thing that separates you from everybody else, is that at the end of the day, you are saying to yourself, I have an option. And that's what Megan meant when she said, I feel like I'm disappearing. She wasn't being dramatic. She was being precise. The part of her that makes choices, the part that says, this is what I want, this is who I am, this is what I'm gonna do, had gotten so quiet, she couldn't find it anymore. She couldn't find her own voice. And all of those little yeses had led to her feeling that feeling of disappearing. Now, before I go any further, I want to come back to this because I want to be clear. I am not telling you to say no to everything. I am not telling you to swing the pendulum all the way to the other side and become someone who doesn't show up for people. That is not what this episode is, because I can already hear some of you saying, sure, Sallie, just say no, but you don't know my situation, or I have a boss and I have kids and I have a family that expects things from me. I can't just opt out. And I hear you. I am not asking you to just opt out. I'm telling you that no is an option. That's it. Not that you have to use it every single time, just that it exists, because for a lot of us, and I was one of them, we go years without even realizing it's even on the table. We say yes so automatically that it doesn't even feel like a choice anymore. It's just what we do. So this isn't about blowing up your life. That is not at all what I'm saying. It's about pausing before you say yes out of habit. Just a pause. That's the whole revolution. Just a pause. And if you're in a season right now where you're trying to figure out what you want, what kind of life, what kind of work, what kind of person you're becoming, then it's okay to say no a little bit more often than usual. Not forever, but just for now, just long enough to be able to hear yourself think. Okay, so let's go back to this concept, right? That you feel as though you are disappearing. So how do you get out of this situation? Let me start with an image. I want you to picture a glass jar, right? You've got the big rocks. I'm sure you've heard this before, right? There are things that actually matter to you, not just revenue if you have a business, but the things in your life that make it feel like yours. Your creative work, your health, your relationships that you want to be in, the dreams you keep putting off. Then you've got pebbles, which are the necessary things like administrative stuff, logistics that you have to do, the oil that keeps things running, right? And then you've got the sand, which is the scrolling, the obligatory texts, the coffee chats with people who drain you, the favors you said yes to out of guilt, the meetings that could have been emails, the emails that could have been, frankly, nothing. Here's the physics of it. If you pour the sand in first, the big rocks don't fit. But if you put the big rocks in first, the sand fills in around them. And most of us, every single morning, start with sand. We open our eyes and we reach for that phone. We check our email. We respond to messages. We check Instagram, right? We respond to whoever got to us first. And by noon, that jar, it's full. We haven't touched a single big rock because we've said yes to all of these other small things. Yes, I'll check the email. Yes, I'll respond now. Yes, I'll do exactly what you're asking me to do in my inbox rather than paying attention to these big rocks. So here's what I want you to do this week. This takes 20 minutes. I want you to pull up your calendar from last week, your whole week, not your just work calendar, but everything. Look at all of it and look at how you actually spent your time. And next to each block of time, I want you to label it one of three things: chose, needed, or defaulted. Okay? So this is your turn to do the very same exercise that I gave Megan with one small twist. Chose, needed, or defaulted. Chose means I actually wanted to do this. It filled me up. I would do it again in a skinny minute. Needed means this was very necessary. Groceries, the dentist, invoicing, all of those things have to happen. But then there's defaulted. And that means I said yes on autopilot. I did this because I feel like I should, or because I didn't know how to say no, or because I've just always done it. Then I want you to count up the hours. I promise you, I bet the defaulted column will be bigger than you think. And that's not reason to feel bad. That's just information. We're just gathering information and data. That's the gap between the life you're living and the life you actually want, are all those hours, and capturing them back. And when Megan did this, she went from working 55 hours at a 20% revenue ratio to 38 hours, and her income went up by $3,200 a month. But here's what she said mattered so much more. She started painting again. She stopped for 2 years earlier because she just didn't have the time. She had time, she just didn't have permission. She was giving all of her time away with the little yeses, falling into that trap day in, day out. So again, I'm not asking you to blow up your life. I'm not asking you to cancel everything and become some version of yourself that doesn't care about people. I'm asking you to find one default and drop it this week, just one. And then take that time and give it back to you, to a big rock, not a work thing, a you thing. The walk that you wanted to take, the book you wanted to read, the bath you deserve, the nap, the afternoon with nobody's name on it but yours, and do it. But the audit is just the what. The real change, it actually happens when you start asking why. So I want to leave you with 3 questions that you don't have to answer them right now. I just want you to sit with them. And the first question is, what am I afraid will happen if I say no? Not in the abstract, but very specifically. Who will be upset? What will they think? And I want you to name it, because when you drag the fear out of the shadows and look at it in the light, it almost always shrinks, right? We're only sick as our secrets. So bring that fear out and let it no longer be a secret. Put it on paper. And then you'll realize most of the catastrophes that we imagine, they literally never actually happen. They never end up coming true. And so you can survive even if the most catastrophic thing probably did happen. Okay, the second question is, whose voice is the loudest when I feel guilty? When you say no and that knot in your stomach, yuck, whose voice is it? You hear it. Is it your mom's, a teacher's, an ex, a version of yourself from 15 years ago who believes being good meant being available to everyone? I want you to name that voice. Because once you realize that you've been taking direction from someone who doesn't even have a seat at the table anymore, then you can start to choose a different voice, your own. And that will be game-changing, let me tell you. Okay, question 3. If I had 5 hours this week that belonged only to me, what would I do? What would I do? Not what would you do for your business? Not what would you do for someone else? What would you do for you? And if the answer doesn't come right away, if you draw a blank, that's not failure, that's data too. That's how far away from yourself the yes trap has taken you. And it's also the starting point for getting back to where you belong, listening to yourself and your own intuition again. So I want to leave you with this. The yes trap doesn't look like a trap. That's what makes it so dangerous. It looks like being a good friend and a good partner and a good employee and a good daughter. It looks good showing up and working hard and being reliable. All of those things are beautiful, but not at the cost of yourself. So you can be generous and still have boundaries. You can be kind and still say no to things. You can love people and still protect your time. I promise you, those things are not in conflict. Listen to me. They're actually the same thing, because the version of you that says no to the stuff that doesn't matter, she has so much more time to give the stuff that does. Your calendar is the real story of your priorities, not your goals, not your vision board, not what you tell people at networking events or right over a glass of wine, your calendar. And right now, I want you to look at it and ask, does this life look like the life I chose? Or is it the life I defaulted into? Because here's what I wish someone had told me when I was 25. You're allowed to build a different kind of life. You're allowed to say no. And the people worth keeping, they'll still be there with you, for you, and by your side. I promise. So if this episode made you feel something, if it named something that you've been carrying but couldn't quite explain, screenshot it and share it to your stories and tag me at The Brim, because I promise you there is a woman in your life who needed to hear this and frankly might need to hear it. And so when you pass it along today, that they need to hear it, but they don't know that they need to hear it yet. So you're doing them a favor and you're being kind and generous yourself. And if you're sitting here thinking, this is me, this is exactly what's happening to me, DM me the word, and on Instagram is default. And I have built something that I want to give you, and it is going to be worth it. So you're going to love this extra little exercise. Got all the way to the end. So that's it for this week. Go do the audit, answer those questions, and I will see you next time. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of The Sallie Ogden Show. I will see you next time.